50 years of independence in Jamaica, and we're going to take a look at how far we have come, as well as global reggae. Up next with Carib Nation, Professor Carolyn Cooper of the University of the West Indies. Carib Nation, I'm Doris Dean. My guest today is Professor Carolyn Cooper. She is the Professor of Literary and Cultural Studies at the University of the West Indies. We're going to talk a little bit about Jamaica's 50 years of independence and how that has played out in their culture. We're also going to take a look at her new book, Global Reggae. And welcome to Carib Nation.
Thank you. A pleasure, Doris.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk a little bit now. You have been in Washington to do a series, a lecture,
yes,
as a part of the Jamaica 50 series, representing where Jamaica has come in the last 50 years, looking at all aspects of it. You chose an interesting look at how far Jamaica has come in 50 years, looking at how people behave on the road
yes,
and transportation.
Yes, I call the lecture Stuck in Traffic.
Yes.
Jamaican culture, outer road. And we don't normally think about culture when, in terms of traffic and this kind of thing. When we talk about culture, we tend to think about the arts and that kind of thing. And then we might more broadly define culture as a way of life. But I thought that this would be an interesting angle to look at, to just see how is our culture manifesting itself on the roads. And I think everybody who drives in Jamaica knows that it's chaos. So we need to really look at how we can improve traffic. And I use traffic now and the idea of right-of-way, who goes first, as particularly the idea of right-of-way as a symbol for upward social mobility, for the struggle to get ahead, and who is going to determine who goes first, So
let's
we really need
prioritize the things that have to be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it was very interesting to me because if anywhere across the Caribbean, I think when you look at how people behave in traffic, it's a perfect example of really what their culture is about, how their attitude to each other and to authority. You also talked about not only people in traffic, but pedestrians, how pedestrians behave and their attitude to the motorists. It's a hierarchy, so to speak. Talk a little bit about that.
In fact, the core of my talk was a poem by Louise Bennett, affectionately known as Miss Lou. And, she's has been a consistent analyst of Jamaican culture.
Right.
And the poem that I love that really illustrated these issues was one she wrote in the 1950s, even before independence, called Pedestrian Crossings. And it was really looking at the pedestrian crossing as a space of crosses in the sense of, a conflict between the pedestrian and the motorist. And there's a Jamaican noun, a cross pass, which means an intersection. But I think Ms. Lou is referencing that idea when she says, the pedestrians are crossing and they're stopping the motorists from passing, so that there's a sense in which you get an intersection of crossing and passing where the motorists and the pedestrian are at war. And, it's the pedestrian crossings had been newly introduced and, maybe the pedestrians didn't quite know how to use them. But at the same time, one senses that they know that the drivers have to wait. So they take as long as they can to amble across the road because now the pedestrian has power over the driver. The driver has to wait. And I sort of use this as an image for social conflict, hierarchies, and how sometimes the low are able to subvert the high by forcing them to wait.
Yes.
So I talked about the pedestrians asserting the right to be in the way.
This is my space. You have to wait for me now.
Yes, actually you suggested that maybe the pedestrian crossing was a kind of catwalk where people are staging masquerades of power, and in general, Jamaican pedestrians, whether they use a crosswalk or not, they have this attitude that, nobody's going to knock them down, that they can take their time, at night they're dressed in dark clothes, dark skin, you can't see them, and they're crossing erratically.
And however.
And they just have this fatalistic attitude because, we have this proverb that says, if you're born to drown, you can't hang. So the idea meaning that, your fate is already determined. Yeah. And I say, we must believe that if you're born to dead in your bed, your car can't lick you down, kill you, so it's all fated, so it doesn't really matter what you do,
My goodness.
So I was really looking at that circulation of traffic as a symbol for a kind of social disorder that we need to address.
Now, also, it, I think, addresses the mentality over the 50 years. One of the things that I drew from it is that many people say we are independent, and many people say, how independent are we? Because we're still tied to certain colonial practices. And then you have those who say, well, why do we have to change to adapt to what the colonial masters said was right in terms of order? How do we reconcile this business of rules and following rules and order versus our culture? Our culture says we are people who are polychronic. We take our time and don't worry about it.
Well, I think when we come to realize that this take your time, do your own thing is not working, that is when we're going to have to stop and say, well, we may not necessarily want to revert to the rigidity of that imperial discourse, but certainly we need to look at how we can get people to take the road code seriously. Because in Jamaica now, the red light doesn't mean stop. It's not sacred. Somebody comes to the intersection and the light is red, and they'll still go through. They keep going through. If it's yellow, that's even worse. They just speed up. The only sign they acknowledge is green.
To get through there.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
And so when I come to an intersection and the light changes, I don't drive off immediately. I look to see which lunatic is going to break the light. So you have to be taking so much care.
Yes, you have to really
because
be
you can't assume that the people that are on the road actually know the road code. I once told a guy who was trying to take away my right of way that I have the right of way, and his response was, everybody have the right of way. So as far as
everybody has the right of way, then where are we going?
But obviously he thought right of way meant the right to be on the road. And even when they know what right of way means, they take it away from you. This man was trying to turn in front of me, and I refused to let him turn. And his response was, true, you have the right of way, make your affair go on, so. So I should have just allowed him to go, even though I have the right of way, So
I guess it's survival of the strongest?
Yeah, so I think we have to balance what we think is our culture versus aspects of this culture that are dysfunctional that we really have to get rid of.
Does that then speak to the fact and belief of some of us that because of the eclectic culture from which we come in the Caribbean, we have a mishmash of cultures and rules, and we haven't really created our own that we can claim to be what we created, and therefore, why do we have to follow what somebody else said? Even though, as you say, that is what will get some order and get things in place. But I get the feeling that there's an attitude, and I wonder whether, in terms of independence, whether we have evolved enough from that attitude, that dichotomy between what is our culture and what has colonialism thrust upon us that we don't want to.
Well, Walter Rodney, Guyanese historian, his brilliant concept of how Europe underdeveloped Africa.
Yes.
And he was talking about economics primarily, also political institutions. But I think we have to recognize that, say, in a country like Jamaica, where the vast majority are African, our origins are in cultures of civility and order. We didn't come from a continent of chaos.
Right.
And I think what has happened in that whole process of colonization is that perhaps we have lost some of the positive aspects of our ancestral cultural traditions. And, we have ended up in this kind of space where rebellion was a strategy for survival. So we rebel against systems of order, even when these systems now are even of our own creation. So we're so psyched to rebel against the system that we don't make an investment in systems that are going to ensure that we operate in a coherent kind of way. So I think, we have a good joke that we give all the time, that only in Jamaica people jump over the fence for a free event.
Or climb a tree.
Yeah, it's free. You can go in, but you're so accustomed to jumping the fence that even when it's free, you still jump the fence. This is what I mean about a systemic refusal to play by the rules.
By the rules, yes.
So I think that is something we have to address in the home, in the schools. It is trying to help people to see that rules are not against us. But people are always trying to get a bly, as we say, trying to do something bandulo, just not playing by the rules, even when there's no need to.
Yes, just to make a statement.
So we have to recognize now that we are the government. It is our nation.
That's right.
We're not fighting against some imperial force that is against us. Although, the politicians routinely let us down. But, we have to say this is our society that we are building.
Yeah. And I suppose people like you, teachers, are the ones who have to help help the nations across the Caribbean, because I think it's something systemic. Even though maybe in different degrees across the Caribbean, but I think it is something that we have to really try to have the system laid, the foundation laid at the very earliest stages of education.
Yes, and also the home, you see. The home is so important because that is where the first layer of teaching
and enculturation takes place.
And then you build on the other layers, school and social systems more broadly. But that foundation that is laid in the home is so important.
Right.
And that is where we have to start.
Now, do you think that the government or governments in the Caribbean have recognized or have bought into that need and their role in making that happen? Because again, we have, as you say, the politicians have let us down over and over. And I always remember interviewing the late Dame Eugenia Charles, who said that her greatest disappointment about politics was that very few people are in politics for the benefit of their people. And that seems to have manifested itself over the years. And I wonder really whether the attitude that we wait on the politicians to make these decisions and to make these changes is the wrong way, that we as people have to take our own role seriously in making the changes, each one do something.
Yeah, well, that's true, you see, but the politicians have been given the responsibility by those of us who choose to vote, because in Jamaica a lot of people don't even vote because they say it don't make no difference or they can't be bothered. But we've given them the responsibility to try to take some kind of leadership role. And so they have to. I mean, they have to try to set systems in place to make sure that children, for example, in homes of safety are protected and don't become victims. And, at different levels of the society, there are systems that need to be put in place which are not in place. And so I think, yes, we have to expect from the politicians some kind of exercise of authority and responsibility. But this doesn't mean that as individuals, we just give up and say, police to do this or politician to do that or so. We have to be able to see how can we exercise responsibility in community. And I think that is why, citizens associations are so important, where people come together. People can come together and talk, how can we improve our community? What can we do? Because you can't always wait for the politicians to do what needs to be done.
Right. In the broader picture, would you say then that the last 50 years have propelled Jamaica not only into the global picture, but have helped in terms of cultural development? Or is the traffic situation a microcosm of the bigger picture generally?
Well, after 50 years of independence, there are people still in Jamaica who say we should have stayed on as a British colony. We have done polls, and amazingly, people still feel this, that we'd have been better off as a colony. So there's that sense in which people feel being part of the British Empire would somehow have kept order and made us more civilized and this kind of thing. I'm not of that school. I believe that cultural independence is important. We may not have the economic independence, but at least we can manipulate symbols of power that suggest that we are intelligent people, that we can run our own affairs. But I think we really have to recognize that not everything has worked as well as it should have. You think of something like Jamaica's excellence in athletics. That's because for 100 years we have had a schools championship program going where athletics has been something that has been taken seriously in the schools. Usain Bolt didn't come out of nothing. There's this history. We just celebrated a century of champs, the boys and girls championships. And I see this as a model.
Of course,
for how the whole society could be if you make an investment in excellence and you put the institutions in place. So every year you have these championships and the people are groomed, and then they develop and you're ready to boss, as we say, on the world stage. You think of Jamaican music, that is another area in which we have had global impact, completely disproportionate to our size. And again, there's a lot of investment in studios and recognition of talent and so on. So these are the two areas in which we have had excellence on questionable excellence. And the question is, how do we now manage to replicate this in other areas? And so that it's not just a question of, whether independence is better for us or not, but how can we use our talents, how can we use our skills, our abilities to really enhance the development of the society and be more inclusive, because we still have the problems of social inequity, the very rich and the very poor. And you have a shrinking middle class, and as long as there are these disparities, poor people are not going to just sit back and accept their condition of disempowerment. And so violence and the crime, and all of these are strategies that people are using to get ahead.
As we say, when you look around the world today, this is what is happening generally in those two polarized ends. Are creating a chaotic scene in the middle, and people are becoming impatient. And the Caribbean is not going to be immune from it. We're too small also to survive something like that. So I think it speaks to the general situation across the Caribbean. Which brings me to ask you one question before we move to talk about your book. How do you see CARICOM playing its role in this 50 years of independence in terms of not only international development, but at home in the region?
Well, I think as the new version of federation, then, less federal and more collaborative kind of thing, if you know what I mean. I think CARICOM has a lot of potential to integrate the region. But we get so caught up now in conflicts, Trinidad versus Jamaica now, and a lot of Jamaicans are mad at the number of goods that are being imported into Jamaica from Trinidad, and
Barbados and Guyana.
Yes, and so that even though we're talking about regional integration, we still have these blind
divisions,
spots where we're not seeing how collaboration can really propel the region forward. So we're still competing with each other. So I think CARICOM is a very expensive institution, very costly, and perhaps we need to look at how better CARICOM could be fulfilling its objectives. I think the University of the West Indies still remains an institution of regional integration, and it has done so for a long time. And even though we find that a lot of the programs now are getting decentralized, so that the individual campuses are doing more and more of the stuff that used to be done centrally. Law, medicine now, Barbados has set up a medical school. Jamaica is setting up an engineering school, has set up an engineering school. So that the impetus for even that cross-fertilization around professional programs, that impetus is, not as strong as it used to be. So it seems to me like we're moving more and more to national institutions, but that regionality is part of the strength of the institution.
Exactly,
and it really, especially in the early days when there was so much movement across the region for people coming to Mona, because Jamaica was, for many years the only campus. And then once you got the other campuses, then that was the beginning of the process of decentralization. So I don't even know how long the university will last as this agent of regional integration. So I guess media is going to be one of the areas, and programs like yours that move through the region. Again, we need to have more exchange of media programs that feature cross, broader than just national issues. Because television, for example, still is an important medium of, sharing information. And so, of course, popular music has now really played a major role. Carnival, the dispersal of carnival within the Caribbean. Jamaica Carnival is going strong, a relatively new phenomenon, but Jamaica Carnival helped to bring the region together as long ago as in the 50s. Louise Bennett wrote about Beryl McBurney and her dance troupe and how they came to Jamaica and had everybody whining and carrying on and say, she says she has a lovely line where she said, McBurney's dancing movement going to make West Indies federate. So
that's right.
Popular culture is one of the ways in which
of doing it.
we
Talking about popular culture and music, we're going to talk about Global Reggae, which is your new book, and that talks about how reggae has really propelled Jamaica across the world and the Caribbean generally. But let's talk
I should say, first of all, it's an edited collection. It's not all my work. It's the plenary lectures from a big conference we had at the University of the West Indies almost 5 years ago. Global Reggae was the name of the conference.
I see.
And it was an idea I'd had for quite some time, which I finally got off the ground, and we got speakers from every continent talking about the impact of reggae there, and it was really a wonderful conference. We have had all of the papers from the conference are archived on UWI TV, so people can go and look at them. Now, I have to warn you that the system doesn't work very well all the time. It freezes up quite regularly, but, at least you can get a sense of what we had for the conference. But the book, now, I'm really pleased it has just come out, published by the University of West Indies Press, and it really gives you a good
picture. And you go all the way back from ska.
And
bring us all the way up to dance hall and the evolution of reggae over there.
We have dance hall in Japan. Reggae in the Pacific, right throughout, Oceania. We look at reggae, Brazil, French Caribbean reggae, Hispanic reggae in Africa, North America, in Jamaica, of course, in Europe. So it's really comprehensive. It's the first academic book that really gives this global audit of reggae, and I'm very happy to have conceived the project.
Yes. Now, do you think that this might be one of those integrating forces, something like this, that can help people understand how there's a basic foundation that we all share, and we have projections as we go along, but we must recognize and get back to recognizing that basic foundation that we all share. One of the things that I said to someone recently, that most people going to Barbados would be very surprised to see how reggae took hold in Barbados. The most formal British conservative of all. And I think you addressed that in your other book.
But Barbados also has its own musics of resistance, but these do not necessarily get the visibility that they should. So Barbados has a very problematic image, because people think Barbados is much more conservative than it actually is. And I think Bajans have learned how to play fool to catch wise. And so they appear to be very colonized, but then there's a side of them that is, very emancipated.
Yeah. Well, if you only see them whine at crop over.
Absolutely.
Then you really
you
know,
realize that, they don't call it carnival, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. Also, in terms of where this has gone, do you think that the young people, this will help young people understand? Because one of the things I found is that we have a generation of young people growing up who are doing things that they have no understanding why they're doing, what is behind it. And I wonder how something like this can help the next generation develop that sense of belonging and pride instead of accepting the other cultures and usually the worst of the other cultures.
Absolutely. Now, interestingly, I teach a course called Reggae Poetry, which I introduced maybe 6 years ago, where we study reggae lyrics as poetry. And I was shocked when a bright young man in the class told me he discovered Peter Tosh in the course. He had never heard of Peter Tosh. Yes.
Wow.
And so, I can't blame him. We are at fault. And I think a book like this will help young people to understand where reggae is coming from, how it has had this impact globally, and might give them a new sense of power.
Pride and power.
Yes.
Yeah. This is something I have been concerned about. One of the things that we, with this program, have focused on, and that is we've discovered that we have a number of people coming out of the Caribbean. Again, going back to Walter Rodney, how we were taught all about the Great Lakes and all about all of Europe, and very little about the depths of the culture of the Caribbean. And so we have a generation of people who left the Caribbean and went back to the Caribbean to learn about it.
Themselves, yes. Absolutely.
And so I think that we need, one of the things that I'm very glad to see over the years is the number of people taking the plunge to write and document what is ours.
Because you see, one of the interesting aspects of the documentation of reggae is that most of the books on reggae have been written by non-Jamaicans.
Yes.
Because they had the good sense to see the value of what we had created. But because reggae and most of Jamaican popular music comes out of the inner cities, it's poor people music.
True.
Middle class, the people who were positioned to write, didn't take it seriously. And the artists who were creating the music were not at that level of self-reflection to say they're writing about what they're doing. They were just doing it.
Right.
So I think it is a later generation, my generation, a little above earlier than me, but the next generation now that has a responsibility to really document what we have created so that the representation of it is not taken over by others who sometimes don't fully understand what
they're talking about.
Absolutely.
Perfect point on which to end. We have run out of time, but I'm very grateful to you for coming to talk to us.
Pleasure to talk to you.
And thank you so much, and I'm sure that this will help young people.
Okay.
Thanks so much for watching us on Carib Nation. Until next time, I'm Doris Dean, and remember, our motto is one people, one culture, one Caribbean, one nation.